When it comes to the innovation, being part of the network was really valuable for Urban Alliance. First, on the program side, and you all saw in the video how the young people talked about how they would be a part of one program and then go to another, and then Michelle talked about the handoff. But being a part of the network, that handoff piece was something special because we weren't just handing off young people, but we had a story in that handoff. So between the network partners, we would come together monthly for different meetings to talk about how we could be more innovative, how we could work together more collaboratively, and then offline, those relationships allowed us to serve young people better across the city.
We've seen our work increase with Metro Teen AIDS. We've seen it increase with the Latin America Youth Center. Every cycle we will probably have 60 young people that are either coming from the Career Academy or the Multicultural Center or from the LAYC WISE program that are actually coming in for some specialized tours. We've seen those young people actually having a great deal of success, and we've seen it not only sort of permeate within the VPP portfolio, but with some of our other funders as well. And so an example is Capital One did a forum a few months ago, and we were invited to come as one of their grantees to talk about the work that we were doing. It was hosted at the Latin America Youth Center, and there was a young person who was a former participant in the Latin America Youth Center who became a Year Up graduate, and she was there because she was now working at Capital One. And not only was she working at Capital One, but she was our student in that class who had the highest earnings of any young person who graduated in our class this past July. And she's actually 22 years old, making $70,000 as a quality insurance tester at Capital One. And because we were able to make that connection with the with Latin America Youth Center, we were actually able to design a pathway for Sandra that was going to help her to define what success for her looked like.
I love that as a leader in that work, that I'm one phone call away. I'm one sort of, way of thinking away from calling a Youth Connect partner who will say, turn that on its side, call this person, and problem solved. And a real good story of that, we unfortunately had a student who's in college. She has a kid who's a great student who had a domestic violence issue. And I was like, I want to connect her to the right resources and the right person, but this student is so close to my heart, I don't want to pass that off to just anyone. And I called a couple places. I call LAYC. Susana Martinez is like, this is what you do, you need to call that person. By the end of that day, that student had not only talked with the counselor connected with LAYC, but she had also found someone who would take on her case from a legal perspective, and she had a plan. And she is still enrolled in school, because my fear was that college was going to go by the wayside as she was dealing with everything else happening in her life. If I had not had that connection, I am convinced that college would have been the first thing she let go of.
For many young people, it's not a linear path that's a one-track path. Many of them are in school, they're working, there's this path that's weaving, and then there are all these other components that come about as a part of that too. How does health become a part of that? How does safety in your environment become a part of that? And all of these are things that help us to be healthy adults. And so through the partners and with each of us having our expertise, we're able to focus on the whole person and not just this one segment, because the one segment approach often leaves a young person who's on this track, something happens and they fall off, but the network has actually created a net that is supporting them throughout their entire spectrum, and it's also created almost a relay race where when there's time for the baton to be passed, that there are two organizations holding on to it. In some cases there are three, making sure that that transition point happens, and so we're seeing fewer young people fall through the crack as a result of that.
So when you bring 6 high-performing organizations together, there's going to be some healthy competition as well, because we're high-performing for a reason. We're hearing how one organization, well, 5 other organizations are doing powerful work, and we want to do better. We want to learn, but then we also want to make sure that we're at the top of our game as well. And to be able to have that healthy competition on one hand, but then like the friendship and the camaraderie on the other is something that is unique and special. And that's one thing that I really love about the Youth Connect space and how between the networks we're able to do that. And even before being a part of the network, a lot of the organizations were working together because we've been doing this work for years. But being able to come together every month in a space and have time carved out to have those healthy conversations, to look at your data, to look at your staff, and most importantly, how you're serving young people is something that is pretty special. And that's something that I just wanted to add about VPP and how you guys have been that backbone in providing that space for us.
Each organization is serving a larger number of students. So part of the Innovation Fund is how can you grow and sustain what you've grown. And so we definitely will see that over time. I do think this is where the sort of 5-year ending and the ability to welcome other organizations can be so impactful, in the sense that there are other groups that are doing really great work that we're also all connecting with. And what happens when we, kind of broaden the circle a little bit so more people are around the table? How many more students are we impacting? And also, are we allowing other organizations to get what we've received from this, which is that razor focus on what we do well and passing off to someone else what we don't do well? And so I think the more places we get to the table, then somebody learns from some of our models, but they also say, you know what, KIPP is really doing that well, or Urban Alliance and Year Up are really doing that well. So I don't need to write a grant to get another career person on my team. Maybe I can just ask them to come do some of the career readiness stuff with my team. From what I see in terms of the young people we're serving and what's happening out there, there's more work that needs to be done. And so I'm excited about the next chapter as a result.
Each person, each one of our panelists who spoke, talked about all the other organizations in depth and what they do in the network. They really know each other. They understand what they do. They want to focus on what they do, and they want to be able to use that network to make sure young people are being connected and that they're not falling through the cracks and they can stay on their path. This is a different kind of work, and I hope that you can hear that in this conversation. For us, I call this the power of the promise of the network. It's exciting for us to hear this kind of dialogue because it's not the typical conversation that a lot of nonprofits talk about as they think about how they work together to support youth.